The Three Little Worms and the Big Bad Bird. Written and illustrated by Thomas D. Kratzuk. Once upon a time there were three little worms. They were in search of a new home, but the three little worms could not agree on the kind of home they should live in, so they split up and went on their own way. The first little worm found a nice rotten apple. He dug a hole in it and wiggled in. It was a perfect fit. The second little worm searched a little harder. A rotten apple was nice, but he wanted something a little more stable. As luck would have it, he found a very nice corn cob, not too far away from his brother's rotten apple. So he worked very hard, and it took a much longer time, but he was finally able to dig out a very lovely hole and wiggled in. He was very comfortable. The third little worm thought that his brother's new homes were very nice, but he heard news that the big bad bird was on the prowl. He decided that he should find a nice, well-built, stable home. He searched and searched and searched. Finally, he found a very big and very strong log that was not too far away from his brother's new homes. The third little worm was much smarter and stronger than his brothers. He knew that his brother, the first little worm's rotten apple home, would soon rot away. He also knew that his brother, the second little worm's corncob home, may not rot away, but the big bad bird would be able to peck it to pieces. So no matter how hard it would be, he was determined to dig and dig and dig until his new log home was finished, and he went to work. Meanwhile, at the first little worm's rotten apple home, the first little worm was resting comfortably, nestled nicely in his decaying but lovely home. All of a sudden, a shadow from above cast over the first little worm's home. "Yikes!" he said. "It's the big bad bird!" He quickly wiggled inside his home all the way. The big bad bird landed right in front of the first little worm's home and said, little worm, it's no use to hide. So come out now, and I'll be quick and suck you inside." The first little worm said, "No way, Jose! Not by the slime of my skinny skin!" So the big bad bird pecked at the rotten apple home. But the first little worm already slipped out the back door and wiggled as fast as he could to his brother, the second little worm's corncob home. He made it just in time. As soon as the first little worm crawled inside his brother's corncob home, the big bad bird landed right in front. He said, little worms, don't be such teases. There's no place to hide, so give up, or I'll peck you to pieces." The two little worms were very scared now. It's one thing to get sucked up whole, but have you ever been pecked to pieces before? The two little worms shouted back to the big bad bird, "No way, Jose! We told you before. We'll tell you again. Not by the slime of our skinny skin!" And the two little worms slipped out the back way just in time. The big bad bird started pecking angrily at the corncob home. However, the two little worms had already arrived at their brother's, the third little worm's newly finished log home, and wiggled inside just in time. For the big bad bird had finished pecking the corncob home to pieces and saw the two little worms slip into their brother's log home. He quickly flew over, but he wasn't quick enough. All three little worms were safely inside. Knowing full well he couldn't peck the log home to pieces without hurting his beak, The big bad bird waited and said, little worms, you do not play fair. I may not be able to peck this log to pieces, but you beware. I will wait right here however long it takes, for when you do come out, little worm steaks. The three little worms, horrified at the determination of the big bad bird, knew they must think of something. They knew the big bad bird was right, and sooner or later they would have to come out of their log home to get their own food and water. So the third little worm came up with a plan. They snuck out behind the log home, where the third little worm knew there was an old snake skin. The third little worm told his brother, the second little worm, to stand on his head. Then he told his older brother, the first little worm, to stand on top of the second little worm's head. Then the three little worms squeezed into the empty snake skin. And now they looked like a long, wiggly snake. They snuck around behind the big bad bird very quietly and tapped him on the shoulder. When the big bad bird turned around, the three little worms let out a big hiss. The big bad bird was so frightened, he turned white as a ghost with fear and flew away, never to be seen again. As for the three little worms, they learned that in order to survive in this world, you must cooperate and stick together. And they did, from that day on, and lived happily ever after. The end.